So we're delighted that such a great turnout come to the beautiful drill hall built in 1916 for Mario's what could be really profound talk. I know that in February this year, the Australian government became the first government in the world, can you imagine Australia, to legalise the use of psilocybin for post-traumatic stress disorder, and also to allow MDMA to be used for people with great mental problems. I imagine people who might have been at war, that kind of thing. And so that's an amazing breakthrough. Just giving flyers around recently, I've met a few people who have been so deeply grateful of that possibility, like they felt like they've been saved by it, you know, from eternal depression. So it's amazing work, and so I'm really honoured and happy to introduce and welcome Dr. Mario Alam.
Good evening, everyone. Good, hello. Thank you for everyone for coming tonight and giving up your Wednesday night. I really appreciate for us all to come and explore this topic of psychedelic embodiment. Who here has explored psychedelics? Just want to see you raise your hands. Oh, it's around Mullumbimby, of course. Yes. Who's experienced profound states with psychedelics? Who's experienced negative experiences with psychedelics? Who's a feeler in the room? Raise your hands. And who feels other people? Yeah. Let's all just take a deep breath in for a moment. I just want to bring in space for us all to be here together. Just a breath in and a breath out. And let's all take a deep breath in together. And out. And just tune into your body first and foremost. And just be aware of any sensations that arise in your body today. And use your own hands just to tap any part of your body that may need just an awareness to bring you into your body here tonight. I know for me, I've got my little nerves of my little child that had a major speech impediment, slurred speech, and now speaking in public spaces. And so I'm tapping my heart to let go of a bit more of those nerves also. And who was the one that was giving out psychedelic mushrooms outside and raise your hand? Cacao, that's right. And so firstly I'd like to, as we are here, I'd like to acknowledge the Bunjalin Nation and people on which their land we sleep and play. And I want to honour the people of this land, their culture and their practices with deep respect for the elders, both present, past and emerging. As Pranama said, Australia's first country in the world to legalise psychedelics. Yay, Australia doing something that's forward-thinking. And on February 3rd this year, there are many countries that are allowing psychedelics in terms of particular states, like you've got Oregon states or Colorado, but Australia as a nation, we've just started to make that huge shift. And rightly so. We've got at the moment 1 in 7 people experiencing depression. We've got rates of suicide that are rising in recent times. And we're seeing the cascade of what recent impacts of things like war, things like COVID are having on our people. But in Australia, we're not getting effective mental health treatment. So this is a huge step forward in the right direction for our mental health of our people. But also, I'm really excited for what it would mean for the consciousness of the country. And so from July 1st psychiatrists in Australia will be able to have been able to prescribe with confidence psychedelics, both MDMA and psilocybin. And so I've been on a mission for helping this movement in Australia, and I work as a general practitioner in Mullumbimby, and I can talk about many reasons why it brought me to Mullumbimby, but I'm also on the advisory board of Mind Medicine Australia, which have been pivotal in bringing the legalisation of psychedelics. I'm a holistic preventative health specialist, and for the last 10 years been developing programs that help to prepare individuals for psychedelics, as well as for integration of psychedelics or as an alternative to psychedelics. And so I come from a space of really deeply inquiring about how do we bring the wisdom of psychedelics back into this physical realm. In my exploration, I explored neurolinguistics, psychosomatic, mind-body medicine, yoga, bodywork. I've done hundreds of workshops, different retreats, all the time trying to explore how do we actually awaken that wisdom from the psychedelics into this physical realm. That's some of the things I want to share with you guys today also. I'm also the founder of World Doctor and hold annual events called Embodying Psychedelia, which we held our first one this year, where Prema also presented, where we brought together practitioners to help to integrate that wisdom into psychedelic realm, into the physical realm, because we are feeling. We are meant to feel ourselves, we're meant to feel each other, and we're meant to be connected to the natural world. And so remember tonight, breathe. Breathe. Breathe into your body, breathe into your feet, your calves, your knees, any part of you that feels a little bit of tension, just breathe into that and tap that part of the body. Still learning how this thing works. And so tonight is going to be two parts. The first part, I really want to kind of engage with what I've learned for the last 20 years in working in medicine and the human experience and how trauma is developed, because the foundations of that information will open up the wisdom of what the psychedelics are looking to do. And I've done my best to simplify such a complex human experience. And I stand on many people out there that are doing the work on helping this trauma transformation. And the second part will be exploring how the psychedelics are working, how we can integrate those both for ourselves and our community at large. Because since the inception of this legalization, it's meant that the conversations opened up. And for that is being profound with my patients, with people, with the community. Who's noticed that in this year alone, the conversations opened up significantly? Who's who's spoken to somebody who started, say, microdosing this year? Yeah. And so people who've never been open to exploring some of this stuff now are starting to ask these questions. How does this help me? And so we'll be exploring that in the second part. And it's a big topic to cover, and so your support is needed for me to also step into my confidence to deliver this. And so whatever you feel there's a resonance in something that I share, click your fingers so that I know that I'm on the same page. It helps me to speak up. Yeah? Thank you. Who's been to Crystal Castle? Do you know those large, giant crystals which stand in one point where there's two large amethysts?
Geodes.
What?
Geodes.
Geodes. Okay. Geodes. My apologies. And so there once, when my daughter was born, we went to Crystal Castle, and there I was taking a photo of my daughter, standing between the domes with her mother holding her and her grandparents behind her, and I was there in your place taking a picture with the sun coming through of my 10-day-old daughter. what do you see?
Two hands.
Energy.
The right way.
It's the aura.
And so that energy that exists, it wasn't around the mother, it wasn't around the grandparents, it was around my 10-day-old daughter. And it was beautiful to witness that light coming through and penetrating on the purity of my 10-day-old daughter. Because we forget this part of ourselves that exists. It almost gets numbed out of us. And so I really want to bring the awareness of this sacred container that we are born into. Thank you. And it was really beautiful to see the rainbow light that comes through the spectrum of light. And I really want to bring that in later on, because we are light beings coming in and manifesting to this physical form. And the spectrum of light penetrating through that field of energy shows that penetration of light spectrum that we see. And so we are energy. We know this, we feel. Many of you have raised your hands, we feel. Tapping any part of your body that you feel to bring more into your body. I know for myself it's my heart often. I can feel, I'm an empath, I feel a collective space often, and there's a lot of work we're moving through as a collective, and we have to do this together. And we feel each other. And this is not new. This is not new information. This is not new. Nothing this surprises us. It's the teachers have come across our lifetimes to teach us this. We look at the Christ and the Buddha, Chinese philosophy, Indian philosophy, and the two gurus and the teachers always need to remind us of our sacred being that is here. If I used to take a deep breath in together and out. And you notice that they're all depicted with these energy fields around them. They've attained these moments of these periods of enlightenment, of the awakening. And so what happens? What happens to us as humans? And this is the journey I want to share with you guys tonight, is in the first part. When we're first born, we are, as my daughter was, a pure being coming to the world. And so as we're going through life, we start to experience our emotions or our experiences of life. And what happens when a child, say, has a fight with another child? A little boy takes another kid's toy away and the other kid gets angry. And that anger gets experienced in that child for the first time. And if that child has parents around them that hold him and try to explain and help him to navigate the nervous system, help him to explain what's happening in their body, and to move that emotion through, to process it and hold them, then they can move that emotion through. But often when a child's left alone in an emotional state, that's when the seeding of trauma starts to occur. And so when a child at that point then starts to internalize their world, they start to go internally. And that emotional density starts to anchor. And because the nature of energy will attract the same again and again, these experiences will start to come into place, where we start to layer upon layer. These emotional experiences start to densify, whether it be anger or sadness or hurt or guilt, abandonment, shame, disempowerment, all these different emotional things that we internalize from that early seeding of disconnection that occurs when we are left alone in an emotional state. And sometimes, and I've seen it in many people, where that emotional state is not just in their early childhood, but also in their fetal development, has passed on through their mother, or is coming through the generations, or is coming through the past lives. And I've taken many people back into past lives or past generations or fetal development to see where that trauma is held and that first imprinting. But also those imprintings hold the gold, hold the wisdom that's there ready to awaken a memory of the consciousness to come back into the fullness of our being. Yeah. And so a lot of these emotions are often interlinked. Particular events will have anger and sadness or hurt embodied within them. Now, so it becomes like cobweb where we become our soul, our being becomes entrapped through this filter, this cobweb of emotions that will start determining and filtering our world. Now we have 2 million bits of information coming in per second, of which our mind is only able to perceive about 156 bits of information based on our programming, our culture, our traditions. So when depending on our environment and how we perceive our being, we start to see that it creates the filter, the limited 156 of the 2 million bits of information that gets filtered, that determines how we start to then perceive the world. So if a person shuts away or it goes into emotional eating, it's often there's a deeper trauma that's there, that's been unresolved. And I've taken people back where they would explore, one woman would experience sadness, and she was putting on a large amount of weight and didn't know what that was coming from. And as she would traverse back through her relationships, she experienced sadness in different parts of her body, went back to her childhood, finally went back to her fetal development where she could perceive her mother being beaten up by her father. And the sadness that her mother experienced at that point in time entered into her field of energy. At that point in time, when she transformed the wisdom, realizing that she can own her own life, she doesn't have to take on other people's shit anymore. She was able to transform that. So the trauma often can be held in deep, holding that back. And there are many teachers that have talked about how the emotions are also held in the body. Bessel van der Kolk has written a great book on The Body Keeps the Score, and talks about the physiology and how the entrapment of the different emotions are held in the body. Because we live in a world where we are taught to think, but not necessarily to feel. We've lived for the last 2,000 years in a more patriarchal system. And only recently has the emergence returning back to the feminine principle, back to the earth, coming back into our body. Great 3 books I'd recommend by also Peter Levine with Waking the Tiger, talking about the physiological response that occurs in trauma. And the Gabor Mate talks about how though in mothers who've been stressed before birth, their raised cortisol will have an impact on the child's adrenals and their nervous system for the rest of their life. And so it almost becomes beyond them, because that's what they're born into physiologically. So where do we store emotions or trauma in the body? Where do we store anger? And the vagal nerve is part of it. Which organ is held in the body? In the liver. Where is sadness held in the body? In the lungs. And where is grief held in the body? Around the heart. And where's fear held in the body? In the kidneys. This is really, really key.
Isn't that just where it shows up physically?
It is. But also, I find emotions are often held in different parts of the body, although they're often talked about in Chinese medicine, different philosophies about condensing towards particular organs. But what I really want to talk about is the aspect of fear. Because who's done breath work before? And when you're in a state of breath work, when you're so expanded, you feel that stillness, that expansion point. Often fear will dissipate in that space because we're coming into the fullness of our being. But when we contract from the densities that often separate us from each other and from the natural world, then the fear will start to rise. Because we're disconnected from our truest nature of who we are. A divine being here on this physical plane, learning to explore this energetic space. And so fear is a really interesting one because it's held in the lower part of the back. The kidneys here, and above the kidneys are the adrenals, which throw up sympathetic adrenaline, so that if you're exposed to an experience that triggers you from the impact of multiple experiences, what does your physiology react with? But then goes into either fight, you react, or you flight, you run away, or you freeze. And the development of our body, because the system would be more pushed towards the mind rather than being in the body. Where do kids breathe? Into their belly. Let's all take a deep breath in like a kid. And check it through. Just a few more to bring the playfulness of kids. And anytime you feel to do that in night, welcome to as well, just to allow that playfulness to come back in. Because when we step out of the body, we become less aware of what's happening in our kidneys, and we become less feeling of safe to be ourselves, to be in the fullness of our being. And so if we're not connected to what's happening in our body, then this area that we give the least amount of awareness to, the lower back, because this is the subconscious, less aware, and we step into more the conscious part of our body. And so when we live more in the mind rather than the body also, then that trigger will create that sympathetic drive where it shoots up adrenaline and creates that hypervigilance response, which is what's happening in trauma, in disconnection, in emotional reactions. Who's experienced an emotional reaction where it's just like, what the fuck did I just do? We all have these experiences where it's like it's almost beyond us, where our emotional state overrides us. And the reason why that is that we have the part of the brain, the amygdala and the hippocampus. This is around the limbic system of our brain, which is involved with our primitive responses, our breathing, our heart rates, our rhythms. It's a primitive part of our functioning. It's also the part where the amygdala, which is response to fear, is also situated. So that and the memory is stored in the hippocampus. And if you look next to it is the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. So when that child or adult experiences a trigger due to the multiple layering of that emotional density that may have caused disconnection to self, gets activated, the memory is activated at a primitive level, and that physiological response gets activated at a primitive level, and the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis activates that physiological response at a primitive level, which then overrides the prefrontal cortex, which is where we rationalize our thinking. So it becomes beyond our capacity to rationalize that reaction. It becomes overwhelming. for our system. And as I shared, the trauma goes deep. It goes into childhood, fetal development, generational, past lives. But it's not just trauma that creates disconnection. We look at particular toxins that are in our environment. The one that really goes deep for me is aluminium. When you inject aluminium, aluminium is a known neurotoxin. It's known to cross the blood-brain barrier. And so if aluminium crosses the blood-brain barrier and goes up into the brain, which is quite neurovascularized, which are the most sensitive areas, being usually the hypothalamus and pituitary, which has also got to do with our divine connection. Just saying. So other toxins being the foods that we eat, inorganic foods, things that often, if our body goes into particular contractions where things are not flowing, where the density of emotion has been stored often in the fascia, in our bones, in our muscles. We never talk about trauma held in the body. I went through medical school. We never talked about physical, emotional health. We always talk about mental health and which medication is the right medication for you. But that being said, we're at a different time where now we are realizing that there's trauma that's stored in the fascia, in the organs. And that's part of the experience of where toxins will get, as they're moving through the body, will get caught. And they won't be able to move, and they get stuck. And they become stuck in those organs, or they get stuck in the fascia. Our education system, and not to mention this area is quite a unique area, we have some incredible schools around here. I'm really thankful for the consciousness that's existed in this area to bring in some incredible kids. A 20-year-old who was doing some camera work for me, and it was amazing. And he says to me, Mario, can you just, he's been doing a lot of filming over the days, and he was getting hunched over, and I said to him, he says to me, could you just massage my back? And I said to him, sure. And I kind of was stretching out his shoulders and opening up his arms, and then in just doing really basic things to open and stretch him out, he started to experience psychedelics. He was a starter kid coming through at 20 years old. Something to say about when they're embodied, they've got that nurturing early on, they open up into that deep awakening of themselves. And that these densities are just opportunities for awakening. And that's the thing I want to really, how do we integrate the experience of what we're dealing with as a humans, and to empower ourselves as a collective to transform that, integrate it, to both help ourselves and each other. And so our education system often teaches us early on to think and to get marks and to be competitive, to get an education, very patriarchal type of thinking, using more of the left side of our brain rather than utilising the right side of our brain and the creativity and the exploration of the different neural parts of ourselves. And so the last one is also shoes and disconnection from the earth. I remember when I went and sat with when I was invited to go and sit a Sundays in South Dakota in America, where I went in support initially. And when we arrived there, it's been dry for days. They went, the chiefs went to the bush to find a tree that was going to be the tree of life to anchor into the center of the ceremonial space. Who's heard of Sundays before? Has anyone here been on Sundays before as well? A few. Okay, amazing. And so they have this central tree, which is the connection to the divine, which they pray and they dance. And the moment that they uproot the tree, it's been dry for days, the moment they uproot the tree, rain out of nowhere, thunder out of nowhere, winds come out of nowhere, continues all the way until they put that tree into the center of the ceremonial space. At which, you can't make this up, at which point the rain stops, the winds stop, rainbow comes up, eagle starts flying up above. The connection to the land and to the elements that exist in the native traditions, and their connection through their feet that they remind themselves through, is profound, and it's so much for us to learn on that level. Yeah. And so remember that picture that I showed of my daughter with the, as you there taking a photo, my daughter was there held by by her mother and grandparents between the two geodomes. And that light energy that emanated from her light being. And so we, as a representation of light, if we look at the actual spectrum that exists as we go from base, red, sacral, orange, solar, yellow, and all the way up into our crown, you notice the frequency also changes. And with it changing, it goes more and more rapid as it reflects also where we are in our field and how we breathe into it, so that as it follows the breath, when we take slower, deep breath in, we drop in deeper into our embodiment. And things may come up in the body. Some emotions that are arising or different sensations, just tap any of those parts of the body that may come up. That's also welcome. And so just like kids do, they just naturally breathe, they're just naturally playful, they're moving, they're exploring, and I've seen some of you in ecstatic dance here, so I know you also still do that with me as well. And so it's reminding ourselves to look at how kids are engaging, especially with their breath, and just mimic that breathing to lower belly, because it helps the vagal nerve to calm down. If we look at the polyvagal theory using the vagal nerve, the vagus is here next to our ears, where our communication and our vocalization occurs. Now, لما أنا بتكلم معكم بالعربي هو اللغة تبع الأولاني, my native language in Arabic, I feel myself dropping deeper. When I speak in English, I find myself more in this part of my body because it's not my native language. Cuando hablo contigo en español, soy mucho más fluido. I feel much more fluid when I speak in Spanish. And so the importance of words in terms of the resonance of our body is also quite potent. And so humming is a really powerful way to activate the vagal nerve that goes all the way through to our belly and helps us to feel safe and activate the parasympathetic system. So I invite you all to hum with me. On the count of 3, we'll take a deep breath in. 1, 2, 3. Two more, activating the sensation away from the ears, all the way down to the belly. And this time, inviting you to prolong the hum and slower, deeper hum with your eyes closed. We felt that differently in the last one. Yeah, I felt as well with you guys. Thank you, guys. I felt it more in the body, thank you. And it comes with how we live our world that we feel safe. To come back to our bodies and to be here in our being. And Maslow's pyramid of needs, hierarchy of needs, talks about our basic needs of breathing, food, water, shelter, clothing, sleep. And it must be said, and what's happened in recent times in terms of COVID, in terms of the floods, and the number of people that have been impacted by the floods, where their food has been impacted, their water, their shelter, their clothing, their sleep. And not only are they dealing with the cobwebs of unintegrated parts of themselves, but they also got the added aspect of their basic needs impacted, so that what happens to their physiology, their amygdala gets really hyperactive. And I've seen through my doors over recent months and last year, so many more people coming through with physiological stress. The amount of psychologists that are being booked out now months in advance has never been to this level before in all the years I've worked as a doctor. I wanted to share the story to put into perspective about the Buddha. Now, Buddha, for some may not know that he was born of a monarchy. He was a prince. And it was said early on, a wise man came and said to the king, if your son was to experience pain or suffering, he would lead a life of being a spiritual man, an ascetic. And so it was that his father decided to remove all people in the kingdom that were dying or that were of ill health or suffering and move them to a village far away. And so Buddha grew up with learning from the Vedic ways, archery, wise wisdom keepers. He had a council of people around him to advise him, to help him. You could say he probably didn't experience a lot of trauma early on. And so he grew up and he got married, he had a child. And one day he decided to leave the kingdom. And as he went, he experienced somebody that was dying for the first time. And that experience created so much pain in his body, he didn't know what to do with it. And there he started his journey to find enlightenment. And I mention that because to hold a strong pillar of compassion for our journey, because those early imprintings make such a huge impact, but they can also be processed a lot easier and faster with psychedelics. And I'll share how that also comes into play. One of the other things was that there's often reference to meditation, but there's not as much reference to also the yogic practices. And really want to highlighting the importance of not separating the two. Both were part of the teachings. But we seem to focus more on meditation and focus on the science behind meditation. It's less respected or less acknowledged about yoga, but now it's changing a lot more. Again, more the patriarchal thinking approach that's been indoctrinated. And so, as an exploration between us, knowing ourselves and what the journey's been so far, let us explore what are the things that contract us and what are the things that expand us, because we are energy and motion beyond this physical. And so that interchange of membrane that exists what contracts and expands that membrane? What are the things that contract, let's say? Fear. Louder. Again? Hunger. Anger. Pain. Shock. Grief. So let's put them all under emotions. What else apart from emotions do we?
Cold.
Cold. Cold can do both ways, actually. We've done ice bath before. So it can be both. It can contract and expand, I would say, on that one there. But it's important. And abuse. And we've also got like things like toxins can also contract the system. What else can contract?
Accident.
Again?
Accident.
Accident, yeah.
Belief systems. Reason. Outlaws.
Alcohol. Yeah, there we go, you guys got it. There we go. What is it? Separation, yeah.
Logic.
What was that?
Logic.
Logic.
Rationality.
Oh, too much thinking in the mind? Yeah, okay. Alienation. PTSD is part of that for sure, yeah.
Disappointment.
Disappointment, yeah.
Bias research.
Religion.
I'll take that one. It can do both, it can do both. I'll warn of both. Anxiety, emotions, yeah.
Government.
Governments, yep. Yeah.
Forced vaccination.
Forced vaccination.
That's abuse.
That's abuse, yeah. Abuse. Trauma, yeah.
Don't they all go both ways?
They can, but initially they contract before they expand. Another one I'll mention is also things like lack of exercise, lack of breath, lack of resources.
So much screen gone.
What's that?
So much screen gone. Technology.
Technology.
Confusion.
Everything is so.
And so what things expand us? Love?
Kindness.
Love.
People. Acceptance.
Gratitude. Travel. Singing.
Singing, absolutely.
Breathe.
Dancing.
Breathing.
Breathing, hugs,
Safety.
community,
Have sex.
sex, birth, movement,
Singing.
singing, we've got singing,
Health.
health, good health, yeah.
Community.
Community is so important. Thank you, Mullumbimby, for, I've travelled the world, sitting with different cultures, exploring different communities. This is the first place in my life where I feel like this is a place I want to live. I love Mullumbimby. It's such an incredible place. Thank you for being part of this community. Thank you. Nature's essential. Animals. And a lot of the ones you're going to mention is things that actually help us to regulate our nervous system, to feel connection. Yoga. Skin to skin music is beautiful. Meditation. Dancing. Laughing is the best. Nature, we wrote here. Yes. Music. So you notice the things that contract us and the things that expand us. And we all know this within ourselves. And so I want you to share, find the person next to you And I want you to share with in twos or threes. How is your life at the moment in terms of the balance of your contraction and your expansion? So, of the person who's got the longest hair goes first, or start. So find the person next to you in twos or threes and share with them how your life is, how it balances expansion and contraction. Whose balance was more towards the expansion? And whose balance was more towards the contraction at the moment, knowing that it changes all the time? And who's in balance, found themselves in balance between the two? And so it is this balance of this plasma of our being, of our energy, that we exist in this world, both of ourselves, with each other, but also into how we are with our people that we spend our time with, our family, our friends, our community. Because it's said that we are most impacted by the 5 people we spend the most amount of time with. And so that that field of awareness through our plasma will also be largely impacted in terms of the contraction expansion in the world around us. And that's where it becomes really important when psychedelics come into play, because when you shift a lot of those things that have been contraction, that being emotions, and start to see the world in a more open way, what naturally happens is you want to shift the things around you. The things around you no longer see them the same way, because you've changed your filter through which you see the world. And naturally, as nature wishes to go back towards the sun, in terms of nature always rises with the sun, we wish to expand into our being, into ourselves. And so it is that that balance exists, and in the work that I do, I always explore how do I facilitate and support my patients and my clients to find more expansion in their life. And for the last 7 years, I haven't seen new cases of cancer among my patients. I feel I've got one of Australia's best statistics when it comes to health, not because I've lucked out, but at the same time I live in an amazing community of people who work hard to look after themselves. And so it's a relationship that exists between us, where because I'm an empath and I feel, if you're working with me, you're here to also expand that field, because we're meant to feel. I don't want to shut myself down, nor do I invite anybody else to shut down. I enjoy the expansion point of what's possible, because the psychedelics are about to come in a massive way in the world. And if we don't have our systems prepared as individuals, as a collective, for the midwifing of this conscious transformation that's coming, where we are moving from this patriarchal to more embodied connection to the mother, and that inherently is going to open up our connection between us to feel. And I'm excited for what that's going to do for disease, because our contraction and our expansion, if we contract for long enough, that will lead to some electricity in our body. But keep expanding, keep finding ourselves back to the light. We find our ways to breathe more into our body, into our being. And so with that, I'm going to leave you guys with the break. I just want you to recognize this is time for... Because the second part we're going to explore what's the role of psychedelics and how the medicines such as psilocybin, MDMA, ketamine, LSD, DMT, 5-MeO-DMT, mescaline help this transformation that's hitting the planet, and Australia being the first. So in the lunch break, I invite you guys to have, not lunch break, in the break, have forgot what it's called. Just invite you to have a conversation with others about your own journey with psychedelics. Share for this space, like tell them what psychedelics you've done, what you've explored, your experiences. Allow the conversation to open. Yeah. Thank you.
So, yeah, thank you, Mary. Isn't he brilliant? I'd like to just say that when we did the 3-day workshop with Mario, and because you're going to have another one in March, and it's in...
At Mount Tambourine, we've got here Tara and Tony. Could you stand up, please? We've got, just for your hands. So they've invited us to hold Embodiment Psychedelia there next year, which will be incredible. It's a gathering bringing 300 practitioners and visionaries. How do we activate that psychedelic wisdom into the physical realm? And I'm here committed to making transformative experience in Australia that Australia has never seen. But it has to be the collective. We do it together.
So I just wanted to say that in case you forgot at the end. Because when we did the last weekend, you know, there were 30 practitioners. I must have done 30 different events. But it was your event, Mario, that deeply touched me and deeply cathartic me and deeply woke me up. And so, you know, that's quite something to say when all those amazing practitioners were there. So we are going to have like just 15 minutes if we can, 20 at the most, but time to get a chai or a tea of your choice, a samosa, a bliss ball, a biscuit. So please help yourself, or please go to the kitchen if you'd like something.
Take a deep breath in. And exploring. All right, so let's take a gauge of the room. Who's explored with psilocybin? Who's explored with MDMA? Who's, keep your heads up, who's explored with ketamine? And who's explored with LSD? DMT. Quite a lot. 5-MeO DMT. Yeah. Okay, that's impressive also. And mescaline. It's quite a lot too. Notice I also left my hand up the whole time, just in case. Peyote. Who's explored peyote? Yeah. Chuma, San Pedro, all there's many. So mescaline kind of is the peyote and the San Pedro. Sorry, I'm in mescaline, yeah. So if we look at the culture of psychedelics in terms of just basic research, is that we're looking at up till in the 60s and 70s, started to see a rise of this psychedelic renaissance where psychologists and psychiatrists were exploring it, especially in the East Coast and West Coast of the States. SLN Institute, a lot of progressive groups were exploring psychedelics, and we could see the surge of research that was existing in that period of time coming up to the 1970s. But then what happened in the Nixon government when people were going out and putting up signs, drop acid, not bombs, there was a political movement that occurred at that point in time, which not only was against the people that were wanting peace and wanting to dismantle the war, but also the blacks of the time also that were part of the underground movement, or they wanted to attack both groups. And so at that point in time, the war on drugs started to occur. And so here, war on drugs is a war on us, and that was reflecting also the impact not just for the people against the Vietnam War, but also on the blacks also that was being attacked in that culture. There's a book I'd highly recommend called The Immortality Key. Anyone here read The Immortality Key? Highly recommend the audio version. It's really, really, really long. But just listen to it in your own time. What it talks about is how it originally was psychedelic alcohol such as beer that was first created, and those psychedelic beer was what then led to the evolution and the involvement of culture and society. That then went on to being psychedelic wine, where they would find also in the remnants around the Middle East area the remains of the vases that were made of clay, and they would find things like lysergic acid, soma, and other psychedelic type compounds in there. Now, the reason I mention this is that the aspect of exploring consciousness has existed for a long time, and that's actually what's helped society and culture to evolve. If you look at, and this is a bit controversial, he talks about this in the Bible, in the book, was at that time there was also the Dionysian tradition, which and a lot of the Lycian wisdom. But we look at, say, the Dionysian tradition, which was the god of ecstasy and wine, and was also said to be the born of a virgin birth and the Son of God. And what was done in regular festivals, they would be consuming psychedelics at that point, which we find the remnants for. And one of the things that was really important in the book was talking about how the initiation of the Dionysian traditions, that people would come far and wide to prepare their body and prepare their vessel before even going into a psychedelic journey, into being initiated by, there was at the time the priestess. They would come far and wide and they would take the sacrament, and was given by the priestess, and was that remembering that awakening of the soul in this embodiment. But they would prepare the vessel first. And I speak about that because it comes back to psychedelic embodiment. And how do we actually take care of this physical body? And how do we prepare ourselves for a really deep medicine? Not just for the purposes of treating PTSD and anxiety and depression. These are part of it. But there's actually honouring of what these medicines are awakening in our being. Since the model that's coming out at the moment is one that's very clinical, where to get MDMA, which is utilised for PTSD, or if there's depression, we utilise psilocybin. It's currently in the hands of psychiatrists, and the current clinical model is usually 3 doses of either MDMA or psilocybin over a period of about 6 weeks, or it could go over months, in combining with its preparation and integration along the way. But it's the initiation of the body, which in a system where we think is missing, because these are medicines that are awakening the capacity to feel. And so I really encourage the community to start exploring, how do we prepare, because since this has all now happened, not only has there been now more access to the conversation, but also more access to the medicines, but there's also been a large underground resurgence occurring. And I really want to stress the importance of the preparation. It's said that for every hour of preparation is equivalent to 6 hours of integration. And I mentioned these before I go into talking about what the psychedelics are doing, because that's really what I want you to take home, is the importance of preparation. Yeah. So these medicines are helping us to find our way, to navigate, to find balance between our left and our right sides of our brains, our analytical, our thinking, our masculine, our feminine, our higher parts, our lower parts, all parts of us, and ultimately is awakening that who are we and what are we here for. And so the aspect of navigating that psychedelic integration, I invite you to Remember, ground, transform, and expand. Repeating with me, ground, transform, expand. Put simply, is to ground the energetic of our body, our being here, beyond this physical. Transform all the densities, or all the unintegrated parts of ourselves that are potentially contracting, to ultimately expand the soul, which is like my 10-day-old daughter that remembers, but wasn't available to have the higher level of consciousness at 10 days old. But as adults, we have the opportunity to expand back into who we are. And so we'll start off with psilocybin. It's for depression. It's what I call the connector. Mycelium connects as a mycelium across the underground and helps things to transform from death into life again. It's an incredible ally of humankind. If we end, mycelium will continue beyond us. And so it's a connector. And if we look at what happens to a brain under psilocybin, on the right-hand side is a placebo of an adult. Running everyday life, and the one on the left-hand side is of psilocybin when given a large dose. Now, there's various doses. There's a medium dose, 1 to 2 grams. A 4 gram is a strong dose, and a very strong dose is about 7 grams. When given a 4 gram dose, the one on the left-hand side under functional MRI shows how the neural connectivity across the brain starts to reconnect across the fibers. And if we think about the physiology between our mind and our body, when we reconnect those fibers, it also reconnects to our sensory capacity to feel more so. And so what happens with depression? And why is psilocybin important? If we look at if a person is overwhelmed with emotions in this world that thinks rather than feels, and that overwhelm of emotions overtakes our body, what happens? We go more into our mind, and as a way to deal with the overwhelm of emotions that are somatically held in, because we've talked about how it goes in early and the patterning that's happening, but that's happened in childhood before we're even aware. And yet that's still playing itself somatically in our system. And that overwhelm pushes up into the mind, where somebody may shut down their mind as a mechanism to deal with the overwhelm. And so it is that psilocybin, how it works, it reconnects neural pathways, to reconnect the fibers, also to feel and to sense, and to help that reconnection occur again. But often this needs to be done with preparation beforehand, and processing a lot of these work in that cobweb. There's a lot of people also exploring now microdosing. And if you look at in the States, in Colorado, psilocybin is available readily. In the conference that happened this year, which was the largest psychedelic conference in history, they had stalls giving psychedelic mushrooms. I'm like, oh, that exists. That's coming. That's coming. It's not just like, it's coming. But it's a preparation phase we have now also as a community, but also as a people to help to shepherd, to midwife this transformation. Because psychedelics aren't to be just taken lightly, they can also be harmful. And I've seen it come through my daughters, where someone's taken a large dose and they've gone psychotic. And it's taken them months and years to recover. Not to be taken lightly, they're potent medicines. But it's often because this preparation work hasn't been explored first before they take psychedelics. And it's the mission that I'm on in terms of preparing individuals. I run programs to do this very thing, because I see the importance of that. And they showed that the brain of a child is akin to the brain of an adult on psilocybin. And kids are already in this imaginative world. They're already exploring. Who's got kids here in the room? I've got my 6-year-old daughter who I love to bits, and I have the most amazing time with her. We just play. We're just like, I like to go into the world and create and see and explore. And kids already are in that space where they are open to all possibilities. Their brain hasn't yet been wired to think or act in a particular way. Their filters haven't been conditioned to think in a particular way. They're a lot more open to exploring. They actually say one of the worst things we can do to our children is give them education in the current system. Now, there's with these how we develop ourselves over time determines our filtration system that we talked about, and it's been tested with on functional MRIs with which shows up something called the default mode network, which is the network of interacting brain regions that is active when a person is not focused on the outside. So if a person goes internally and creates the imprintings of their filters, it lights up into different parts of the bodies, and that becomes so you can see where the social cognition lights up, where the rest, which part of the brains lights up, and so in particular, each person will have a different default mode network. So every one of us has got a different part of our brain that lights up based on that information that's come in. And so what psilocybin does, it reconnects the fibers throughout the system to help to reconnect it's like a reset of that system. It gives you a glimpse and understanding of what that looks like and helps to reconnect the fibers in the brain. Alters communication between brain networks, including the default mode network, which are associated with many mental illnesses, enabling patients to break out of repetitive and rigid styles of thinking, feeling and behaving, and promotes a form of active coping to be able to sense their environment, restoring their personal agency. These are some pictures of when I took my daughter to Mushroom Valley. Anyone been to Mushroom Valley? That's right. It's a great festival up north where it's all about mushrooms. And there's mushrooms everywhere. It's a beautiful festival. The cops walk through and they don't have any problems. And they've showed in terms of the different problems with different medicines, psilocybin has, and natural medicine has got the lowest side effects, the lowest problems. But my daughter runs around these festivals being herself. She walks around with her friend feeling safe in this environment. And so the community that arrives with psilocybin that are connecting, not only are connecting within your own neural networks, but also teaching us to reconnect our humanity, our connection to each other, to the natural world. And because it allows a higher level of awareness thinking, it starts to create better pathways of being dropped into our bodies, and so that my daughter feels safe to be herself in these spaces. And she dresses up and she runs around, she's happy as kid. MDMA, the diffuser is what I call it. Because it diffuses that overwhelm, and it doesn't have to be only people with PTSD or anxiety. We all have aspects of the charges of emotion that are stored in. It's rare that I meet somebody who hasn't have something that's in their system. But it depends on how it impacts our expansion, contraction, and how it engages with our outer world, which comes back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs and how our needs are developed, and if our needs are impacted, then it will present itself a lot more actively in stress and activation of the amygdala. And so it comes back to that primitive part of the brain. What MDMA does, it floodgates the serotonin pathways, which serotonin is our happy hormones, and so it's meant to provide you a positive, uplifting experience by increasing serotonin. And because it floodgates the whole brain, it lights up these areas that are often highly agitated, being the hippocampus with the memory, whether negative or positive, and the associated amygdala, and that overwhelm of serotonin across the system. Then memories start to arise up. The amygdala gets activated, but because they're in such expanded state of serotonin, that association to the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal gets also diffused, because it's allowed the physiology to breathe, to move, to shake, to process. Anyone who's seen another person on psychedelics or in a therapeutic session, has anyone noticed where they often just will take a really deep breath, or yawn, or I'm a burper as well, yeah. And so they're literally diffusing that soma that's been charged in the system to allow that physiology to be diffused, to expand out, to make more space, to allow the person to drop in deeper, to embody into their body, to feel their nervous system more regulated. The vagal nerve, coming all the way down, allows the opportunity for that to be down-regulated rather than this constant firing of sympathetic, which is shutting down that vagal nerve, and the person can't be in their body. It's actually hard for them to be in their body. And often you see people, or you hear people who've got a lot of stress, they might get irritable bowel syndrome, where they get diarrhea or constipation. And it's because the vagal nerve from that stress response goes all the way down into the pelvis. And that going down to the pelvis will have an impact on the physiology of how they digest their emotions, their life, their food. Increased sensitivity, more problems with the gut. Even sitting down for long periods of time, we have the psoas muscle that's there, that's part of our deep ancestral primitive muscle development, which when that contracts, it puts us into a state of contraction and fear. So releasing that helps to release the back and to drop back in. Both MDMA and psilocybin will enhance neuroplasticity, consolidate new ways of thinking by creating new ways for the brain to reconnect itself, improves outcomes in mental illness, and improves recovery from stroke and spinal cord damage in animal studies. There's currently, I've got to mention before with the studies, with the MDMA, they're doing a lot of trials at the moment with PTSD and with anxiety, and especially a lot of work that's with veterans, because there's a huge inquiry at the moment around suicidal death among veterans, and so looking for novel ways for treating. With psilocybin, I wanted to mention before was that they've taken. Actually, I'll come back to that in a second. No, I'll take it. So with psilocybin, they had taken people through alcohol detoxification, done studies on people who are alcoholics, and when they detoxified them from alcohol, and then followed up with detox protocols, they found that 75% of people who had been previously alcoholic returned back to drinking. Now, when the study followed people with, had been diagnosed with alcoholism and then detoxified, and then followed by 3 sessions of psilocybin, they found that 25% instead of 75% relapsed.
Can you say that first part again? 75% was.
When they've done the alcohol detoxification and followed them for that year, at the 1 year mark, 75% had relapsed. And when they took them through a detox, followed by 3 sessions of psilocybin, they found that 25% had relapsed instead of 75. So we have finally, it's said like psychedelics to psychiatrists is like the microscope to biology. We're going to see new ways of healing that our mental health system has never seen before, but I again bring the importance of preparing the individual, preparing before we go into that journey. That's really vital, because all this will come up. All this will come up. The trials that we're now seeing there's a lot of trials that are happening across in the States and Europe and Australia, especially with Australia now becoming the first. Everyone's got their eyes on Australia at the moment, because the studies are all coming through here because we're allowed to utilise it legally. But we still don't have the results yet, but they're looking promising from the first phase studies. And I've been a part of the back-end research and inquiry about that as well. But the time will come when a lot of that information will come out for what it's being utilised for. And I'll give you some information on the current trials that are there. An interesting one is also ketamine, which I call the void. Like psilocybin will help to expand, will help to ground in a new state of being beyond the contraction into the expanded sense of self. The MDMA will help to diffuse the traumas and the physiological response that's been activated in that mind-body connection. What I see the ketamine is kind of taking you back to that inner void where you become more of an observer of what happens. You're not attached to the physiological pain or experience of that somatic unintegrated part of self, and it takes you into a more fluid part of yourself, often utilising dance floors for dancing because it allows them to disconnect from whatever ails them. Utilised for depression and for severe states of anxiety, severe states of PTSD. Currently it is prescribed by psychiatrists for the last many years through S8 prescriptions. So it's been available quite readily, but it's not. In the States, where you look around, there's a lot of clinics that are opening up, as well as in the UK, there's clinics that are opening up for ketamine. I've got a colleague of mine who's opening up one in Sydney, and there's a few around Australia as well. So it's actually readily available. But again, I've seen patients that have come through with ketamine and they're not able to necessarily process their emotions because they're in a constant state of just being observing, but not actually able to process what's there as effectively, because there's this aspect of disconnect that occurs, or numbing that's occurring. But it provides a hopeful life for those where it becomes nothing's working for them. And I've seen that save people's lives. A special mention of DMT and 5-MeO-DMT. Now DMT is said to be the spirit molecule. There's a book by Dr. Strauss that talks about the DMT being the spirit molecule. They've actually never really found evidence of where DMT comes from exactly. They're still doing research on that. I know the work of his name escapes me. The guy that does the breathing. No, he's meditations that open up the pineal. Joe Dispenza. So Joe Dispenza is now on the head front of those research, and what they're finding is that through breath work, It activates the system that actually squeezes the lymphatics and the cerebrospinal fluid, that then squeezes and activates the pineal gland. But we're still getting that research about. That's the theory at the moment. It's said that DMT is released at 3 months in the fetal development, at the point of birth, at the point of death, and at near-death life experiences. Also, you can activate it through deep states of meditation. And if anyone's explored, I know one person who did it with me here, dark meditation retreats, where you sit in the dark for at least 3 days to 30 days, which used to be done by the sages a long time ago. And they would find that the brain would initially start producing more melatonin. The melatonin would start to be producing DMT, and the DMT will start eventually producing 5-MeO-DMT. Which 5-MeO-DMT is actually a really interesting one, because it's said to be the 5-MeO is the God molecule. It's the ultimate expansion point I've experienced with any psychedelic so far. Comes from the Sonora Desert from the States, where their frogs would be the toads. It's a toad. My apologies, that's zero. It's a toad that lives underground for 9 months in the year, in pitch black darkness, producing the 5-MeO-DMT, which in 3 months when the rains are coming out, they start to rise up and come out, and the shamans or the collectors will secrete the glands that produces the 5-MeO-DMT, which is then become crystallized and smoked. And I asked my friend, apparently they produce it every 2 weeks, so it's an ongoing source, which I think is great. But also being mindful that it's a profound medicine. There's now research that is happening around its utilization for anxiety, but also for terminal illness and near people who are coming to the end of their life. And what DMT, the spirit molecule, the God molecule, you're experiencing that state of such profound openness of your soul beyond all that contracts you, where you realize you are connected to that infinite source of energy, where the sun and the winds, and just like I experienced with Native American tribes and that connection to nature, it all is part of the one, and all the different cultures are trying to understand that aspect of the connection. And in this medicine was probably the closest I experienced that unity in that. And so I'm excited for the research coming on that level of things as well. Not yet available in Australia, but there's research happening in New Zealand as we speak about it. But it's the non-dual space, and that space where you realise you're one connection to all. And so when you come back into this reality, you realise, well, this reality is a reality that I exist in this current state with all the things that are coming in. But there's always an awareness of that infinite connection, and that in itself is a potent memory, especially if you're coming through your time where your life's ending, and the meaning of life comes to you, flashing you in the face. The deep sense of peace that awakens in that remembrance that's embodied. That deserves I agree. No, it's a profound state. Other medicines such as iboga, cannabis. Iboga has been utilised for people with severe addictions. It's an ego death. There's clinics currently in New Zealand that are working with iboga for people with meth addictions and codeine addictions. Cannabis is the endocannabinoid system, when activated, which is activated through even love, through connection, through touch, through states of ecstasy, joy, are all natural things that activate the cannabinoid system. But also the CBD or cannabinoid that come from cannabis also help to relax and activate that cannabinoid system, which helps to regulate the nervous system. I find that THC, when as an oil, it brings more into the body, which allows more that increased sensitivity to feel that membrane of connection between ourselves and each other a lot more also, and helps people with anxiety to learn to adapt to their neural pathways and their nervous system, because it drops them in deeper and allows the nervous system to be deeper connected. Mescaline, I find it's like a wise old man that sits within you. In an open space, you're embodied in your soul, feeling and sensing, and you receive answers from this masculine part of God. See, that's my personal experience at least. Ayahuasca activates the DMT, and it's like a mother moving through your whole system, helping to bring a purge and purge a lot of the densities that are held up. It's like a very compassionate mother, moving as much as they can in that space. But often people will vomit and they're afraid of the vomiting, but it's just moving the amount of density or toxins or emotions that are held in there. Cambo is a controversial one. There's currently a inquiry happening at Lismore over 2 deaths of Cambo. I'll say this, is that I've seen one patient who had done their own work with Cambo, and they had been diagnosed with stage 4 melanoma, and they had worked with Cambo over a few sessions, and they found that the tumour cell markers that they came back with said, whatever chemotherapeutic you're using, keep using it. So it's a really powerful detoxifier of the lymphatic system. How's everyone feeling so far? Just stand up in these chairs for a moment, just if you need to, just to wiggle around a little bit, sitting down. Yeah. Just wiggle around. And just tapping the person next to you, telling them you're great, just you're great. Touch is so important. Microdosing. Often we refer to microdosing with psilocybin. There's also iboga. Some people work with LSD. We're still waiting to see the research around it because it's still in the early phases of things. But for example, anybody who's on antidepressants like SSRIs, or it's a contraindication to a lot of these psychedelics. But what's being utilised for people that are wanting to explore psychedelics, often as they come off their antidepressants with support, again, with the support, with the preparation, all those things in place. Some people work with giving psilocybin at that point in time to help to navigate that regulation of the moods, to increase serotonin, so they eventually start to wean off with the antidepressants. But again, I mentioned this needs to be done with a trained professional, somebody who knows what they're doing and can support the person appropriately. It's step by step. Because what we're doing with reconnecting the neural fibers back into the somatic awareness into our body to reconnect to our natural connectivity. And so the nervous system learns to adapt itself so that as it starts to reconnect, sometimes some people will go for a 3-month period and then stop and then repeat again. We don't have yet the studies to say what's appropriate, what's not appropriate. But what is talked about is utilising it for a period of time, and the general recommendations which they're researching is 4 days on, 3 days off, or 2 days on, 1 day off, 2 days on, 1 day off. And the normal dose being 4 grams as a full dose is the 1/20th of that full dose, which is 0.2 grams. And so often there's also something called Stamets stack, which combines psilocybin with lion's mane that helps to increase neural connectivity, as well as thiamine B3 that increases blood flow. And that's also been shown to been said to increase the neural connectivity much more adequately. And so I'd say that the answer is intuitive, is use it for the purposes of regulating the nervous system if is utilised in the ways of regulating the nervous system. And come back to the, again, ground, the energy, transform, expand, because this is how do we navigate the integration of these psychedelics. In the ground aspect is creating the safety is really important, both in the body experience around kidneys. So regular practices like a qigong help to drop in, create energetics that's there. You've got yoga helps to stretch out the myofascia to expand out that sensory body. The mental constructs, as we talked about with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, is creating a safe where your needs are met. So in terms of your health, your emotions, your relationships, your finances, business, spirituality, sexuality, so that you have a container that feels safe to thaw out the old sense of self that no longer serves. So when you, as Einstein says, when you create a frequency of vibration, you can't help but move towards it. And that's the same with our physical body and our energetic in terms of our health and how we're moving towards things and how we're expanding into it. Daily practices, so good food, good nutrition, regular exercise, vagal nerve toning. A lot of the osteopaths will do things such as craniosacral. That really, who's tried craniosacral here? It really helps to calm down the system, doesn't it? You feel like really peaceful afterwards. It's really profound when you're under the table and literally you're just like, your nervous system just relaxes when you're being held by another person whose focus is to regulate your nervous system. Profound. But it's still taboo to some degree. Time in nature, which allows us to get to thaw out. Vagal nerve toning, which can be done. So humming, singing, gargling, mindfulness, meditation, yoga, massage, craniosacral, supporting food, supplements and cannabinoids to help to ground in, to allow us to expand out into the system. Transforming is things that can help to move that inner space that's there. So psychedelics, we talked about, psychosomatic therapy and things such as EMDR, for example. Because we were focusing more on a cognitive approach, we're starting to now trend towards things like EMDR, which is rapid eye movement, desensitization, reprocessing therapy, which recognises that the body is storing memory, and we're still a bit taboo about it. But I think the awareness is increasing more so. There's more somatic practitioners, so the change is occurring. But we have to understand that a lot of the psychology out there exists is very more cognitive focused, whereas as we understand the traumas in the body. Breath work opens up that container, it helps the dead system move through. Creativity allows neural connectivities. Acupuncture gets the flow moving through. Body work to move the trauma out. Craniosacral to calm the nervous system down. Ice baths that help to activate the adrenals, to almost shock them into, and as you mentioned, cold being both contractor, can also expand, because that shocking of the system brings you deeper into your body, activates your cortisol, increases your capacity and your resilience, because it brings you more into feeling and sensing. You feel more alive afterwards. All your cortisol is activated in your whole system, and all the muscles are activated in a strong way. Infrared sauna allows the cells to be activated DNA, helps the detox pathways, it allows it to let go of whatever density that's been held in to the cell, and supporting foods and supplements. And expand is coming back to that void, the nothingness. That space where we sit in ourselves and realise that unity consciousness exists within us. Can be tapped into with meditation, with breath work, with particular psychedelics. But ultimately, it's awakening that memory of self beyond these constructs of our culture and imprinting and belief systems, and allowing that space of us to remember and to know self beyond the beyond. And just a simple awareness helps to navigate and to navigate the psychedelic experience. And they did studies where they found that also with alcoholics was that those that had a profound spiritual experience were more likely to abstain from alcohol. And so it talks about these awakening points, as we've done for millennia. They've done initiations and it's helped evolve society. We're now coming to that Renaissance period again, where that resurgence of psychedelics is coming back in, and I'm excited. I'm excited for Australia being the first country in the world. I'm excited for what will open up in terms of healing. And myself, as a doctor, I've been psychedelically informed and an empath for many years. It's taken me a long time to understand my own journey to be able to support my patients. And in that's a lot of that is, I think, for the work that psychedelics has done within me. And so I'm excited for the connectivity that it will also bring in this community. I feel connected, but also in the larger community at large, because when I woke up one morning about a month ago and had stress across my whole body, I didn't realise till later on that day that there was war that occurred in the Middle East. But I felt it in my body because of being born of Lebanon, my mother's from Egypt, my father's from old Palestine, Israel. And so that part of the world was really strongly in me. And so our connections go in deep. Once my father was in Lebanon travelling, and he goes into a hospital. And then this is going to be a little bit private, but I started suddenly shitting green poo. And it turns out that he went to hospital to have his gallbladder taken out. And I've never shat green poo before or after. But the gallbladder, the bile, and so that connection to the flesh, the plasma that exists in our generations also is deep. It's deep. So you ready to press the reset button on your life? Yeah. Yes. Who's ready to press the reset button, baby? What will Mullumbimby be like when... actually, Mullumbimby's already pretty psychedelically informed. We've been exploring this for a long time in this area, so I think we're all here in this area exploring. And I feel this is probably going to be one of the areas for healing that's going to come into Australia. A lot of people will flock here for what this area holds, because if you look at the Black Obsidian, it brings up a lot of things to the surface to process. But how do we as a community also support that midwifing, that shepherding? And a reminder, it's not a silver bullet. It can blow you open. I've seen it numerous times. And my recommendation is to always go with a trained professional, someone who knows what they're doing. Someone who can look at the map of your life and development history and resources and understand, are you able to, or if you open up that world, you're able to have the resources around you to be able to navigate your nervous system. Because if you're surrounded by domestic violence and poor environment, it's going to be hard, it'll be re-traumatizing over and over again, or you open up somebody to becoming more sensitive in their environment, it's not actually compassionate. Level of sensitivity is capacity to regulate nervous system and triggers. So having somebody alongside you that can help you and support you and to come back in to help regulate your nervous system. If you're looking for where there are centres around the world, if you look at Mind Medicine is a great resource, and I'm on the advisory board for Mind Medicine. I'm really proud of what they've done in Australia They've been working so hard to get it legalised, and this year came success. And so on their website you'll find the list of legal psychedelic medical centres. There's many around the world that are doing MDMA and psilocybin, some are doing iboga, and you'll find a list that's there as well. In Australia at the moment, it's quite limited. We're facing that in New South Wales, psychiatrists can only heavily prescribe within the setting of private hospitals. In other states, it's a lot more open. And psychiatrists across Australia can only prescribe in the setting of trials. So it's still limited at the moment, but the change and that shift has started. I'll come back to questions soon. And so what I put there is, if you want to look at, on their website, you also see a list of trials that are happening. And there are a list of trials that are happening across Australia at the moment, where psychiatrists in hospitals and private clinics are preparing with the ethics community, and they're starting to take intakes. So people come ask me, where do I find a trial? Well, you can actually go to the webpage and press on the blue links where the trial ID, and you'll see the details of where you can apply. Most GPs won't know how to refer, and it's not necessarily the role of the GPs, because psychiatrists are the ones that are going to be prescribing. You may need a referral from a GP, but do the research and the work yourself, because at the moment it's still the early days. And to access it in the above ground, it's quite expensive as well. We're looking at 3 treatments of psilocybin or 3 treatments of MDMA. It's said to be about $20,000 for treatments.
It's actually 20,000.
There's been different statistics, and the most recent, and speaking to the Monarch research group in Sydney, who one of the heads in Australia doing it, they're keeping costs down. They're saying across the board it's estimated to be about $20,000 for the full treatment. So there's been a surge of a lot of questions, a lot of also underground movements also opening up as well. And so also really focus on how do we as a community prepare and support have a way somebody access medicines, because people will seek healing and both above ground and underground. But it's really important to prepare and to make sure that we help the individual have that connection. Because if somebody takes psychedelics out in the middle of nowhere, they don't have the resources or the community around them. We're lucky here that we have a community. My work is World Doctor, where I offer a range of impactful services and dynamic programs designed to transform lives through the comprehensive preparation, integration of psychedelic medicines, trauma healing and holistic health practices. I'm on a mission to make it as easy as possible for somebody to do their work before they engage in psychedelics, because I think the overwhelm of what is in the system, if we can make the impact of psychedelics in one hit, in one experience, it will be far more potent. But also, I've seen too many people come through my doors who have blown open that system, and it takes a long time to recover from that. And so on that mission, I hold gatherings where I invite, and I've passed around the flyers, thank you for taking one, where I invite practitioners to come together and bring practitioners that bring the science and the spirituality around psychedelics, combined with the shamanic and the somatic. And where for 3 days we explore what's possible. How do we open up that collective energy in that 3 days through various practices, various information, various embodied experiences, and explore how we support ourselves as a community to midwife this next stage of our culture. This year, the theme is navigating the emergence of psychedelic culture. So if you're inspired, please get in contact, reach out to us, we take a look at the flyer, or send us through an email, or on the website worlddoctor.com. Keep us informed with details. I'm offering also practitioner trainings where I'll be teaching practitioners the ground transform protocols and process that I've designed that help somebody to systematically help to transform the densities that are held in their bodies. which act both as a preparation, integration for psychedelics, but also as a replacement to psychedelics. And from that, I invite the practitioners to come together, to work together, to then hold programs and resets. Because my vision, I'd love to see resets for trauma, for cancer, resets in the sexual abuse will be huge, and how much of trauma is held in the body from sexual abuse. And that's deep. I've got one person I'm working with who's only recently discovered so much of her pain and contraction is from her sexual abuse when she was a young girl, and her overwhelming fatigue and pain. And now she's doing all this work to transform density through body work, through injections, through into her joints by a very, very intelligent orthopedic surgeon, and literally transforming this contraction that's existed from a very young age of that trauma. But we need all facets activated as a collective, each bringing different aspects of awareness and wisdom to do this together. It can only really exist as a collaboration, because any one person doing this alone will only brush the surface. There's depth that's there. And so that's a flyer for Embodying Psychedelia, March 22nd, 24th. I'm excited to be at Mount Tambourine at the Shambhala Centre, where my dear friends Tony and Tara invited me to hold the gathering there next year. And it's gone through the powerful initiation where this first year we initiated through the masculine around Mullumbimby, and next year we're moving it to the feminine counterpart at Mount Tambourine. And so it feels like it's going through a powerful birthing experience as we speak. So I invite you to come through this early stage of this gathering, and please share with the community, because I am calling for support. I'm on a mission to help to bring a wider conversation around this topic, but in a very grounded and holistic way. Thank you. My program protocol that I've designed is modelled on the Grand Transform Expand, where first we create the therapeutic using breathwork to open up the container and opening up that space to grounding a new vibration in terms of health, emotions, relationships, finances, business, spirituality, sexuality. And then to go through a transform, where I go through a protocol of transforming all the traumas all the way through to childhood, past lives, past generations, unlocking at least 3 of the patterns of emotions that are in that cobweb, that allows that cobweb to shatter, utilising body work to move the trauma out of that fascial planes in the body, detoxification to pull the toxins that are in the fascias and the organs, with the saunas to activate those cells to help that DNA to be activated and energy to increase to help detoxification, and combined with ice bath, optional, to activate the system to expand the individual to come into feeling and sensing more of the world, which then allows finally the expand, where we find the main lock in the system, because we all have something that challenges most. For me, it was feeling this space of being trapped, and what it took me back to feeling trapped, and when I was in bombs around me when I was in Lebanon as a young kid, and that feeling of being trapped also made me realise one of my life goals is to open up and help support the opening of the Lebanese-Israeli borders, where I've got family on both sides of the borders who cannot see each other. And my vision is to be able to create resets on both sides and help them to open up. A lot of healing to be done, but it's inspiring. And so we find the biggest challenge that's in the system, and we use that like an ayahuasca journey, where you face whatever's in the system, you take it on full force, and you break through to go below it. Whatever's left in the charge, you take it on, embrace it completely, like a psychedelic journey. Take it on completely and go down below it. You keep going down until you find that space within you where you no longer feel those challenges, where you feel that space of the void. Because that actually really exists within us here now. So every one of us is there now. We can tap into it. Sometimes we just tap a bit harder to calm the nervous system down, to drop back into that awareness. And then from that space, allow the soul to communicate. From a space where it's not filtered by these imprintings, but by the purity of the consciousness of the adult that wasn't available as a child to see the higher level of awareness. But then that disconnect occurred. But as an adult, we can then start to remember and perceive that space that exists within us and allow that part to be remembered to communicate from a grounded level, to be the witness of from that soul of not just mind, but also the body. Let's not forget the body. So invitation for practitioners, participants, ambassadors and visionaries. Step by step I'm stepping forward and I'd really love to launch this out into Mullumbimby. So you guys are coming into my first invitation this way. So really, really special for me to make this invitation to the community because I realise I can't do this alone. I don't want to, and I've got a great group of people around me that are building to help to support this. Because I'd love to work with Mullumbimby with this kind of work. Because Mullumbimby I saw a long time ago as a strong, energetic. We've got people here that have been committed to that embodied journey for a long time. And to awaken that further in the collective, to bring us together to awaken that potential for the psychedelics, wisdom awakening deeper. I'm excited for what potential that will happen for Australia and for the communities around. Mullumbimby is a powerful portal. Thank you for being here. So if we can light up each individual, allow each individual to light up, to remember who they are, and those bit by bit, will start to lighting up, and we're going to see in the next. If you look at what, if you look back in your own life and see how much has happened in the last 20 years, and with the inception of what's happening now with AI, with psychedelics, with as aliens, all these things that are awakening our consciousness. Where will the world be in 20 years' time? And that's a conversation that 5 years we're doing it. Any bids? Anyone remember 5, 6, 3, 6 weeks, okay. And that's how I believe we can raise our consciousnesses by each person going through their own internal and personal journey of healing, which is currently opening up through psychedelics. There's already studies happening about consciousness in Europe. There's shifts are happening, of course, in the States. Australia's leading that change, go Australia. And so science is meeting the spirituality in ways now that we need to, and that shift will occur faster than ever before now. Any questions?
And can they use the mic?
Yes, please. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.